So let's start with things that I really want to know, and these are genuine things. We've talked about a few things about what's happening in the US side versus on my side. My side, not being New Zealand, obviously, because I've also been in Southeast Asia for 18 years. I calculated this morning. Um, so, but it's a part of Southeast Asia. Singapore, for the most part, it's a part of Southeast Asia that's quite a hotbed for good creative, or it has been certainly historically speaking. And like many places, things are changing rapidly. And I wanted to get your take on what's happening on your end and how we can learn from each other, right? So the first topic we have, which is called in the news. What I've got written down here is we you talked a little bit about what you would like to talk about. What's also what has happened everywhere around the world is the fact that big agencies have been mushing together and mushing together and mushing and getting smaller and smaller as we go along. I think used an example of JWT to Waterman Thompson, VML, all that. So let's start with that on what's happening on ground on your side on that. But the biggest story being what is the impact of it in terms of the rise of the small agency? I know that's
Right.
something that's been bubbling on our side for the longest time as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, let me know.
Yeah. Look, I'll start speaking you and interject wherever you want. I mean, for my mind, we know that story that it's almost a joke about how long the acronyms are getting, and it gets so long it's like an accordion, and then all of a sudden they contract it back. So VML, if you look through the scalp of VML, what was it originally? And it's like an acronym that's like 12 letters long that they just mushed together. And it's interesting because like speaking of like people I've dated, there was someone else I dated and very much knew a lot of different brands and talking about as a Wex Wexler, the guy that owns Victoria's Secret and all that sort of stuff. And you look inside his portfolio, and there's so many brands that are iconic and people know and people love and aren't just sunset sort of dinosaur bones brands. And but they've just been parked and they're just sitting in the IP of his bucket. And I can't help but think like in advertising, there's a lot of that stuff. And it's weird as well because recently there was some sort of a you know set of reports from WPP where they pulled out and they displayed to everyone, this is our main brands, la la. And in amongst VML, they have J. Walter Thompson. And that's coming not from an advertising PR, that's coming from marketing PR. And it's like, why have you got a dormant brand that you've rolled into another brand? And the backstory, obviously, JWT became Wonderman Thompson Possible, and then that became VML1R, and then that became VML. And and I'm like, why have they even got that in the main three headers when it's a dormant brand? And it's
Mm,
just interesting how 2 points. The first point is you go back 40 years, every brand had its own currency. So if you wanted a writerly thing, then you go to like usually BBDO. If you want a funny thing, then you go somewhere else. And all of these had these different characters. And just through the essence of streamlining and going digital through streamlining expression, we've got less and less brands. But it's really interesting that I personally think that they're parking a lot of this IP on the side. And are they going to bring it back at some point? Maybe. I don't know. But it's interesting.
so look, I mean, I think you're right, but um, as much as that's look, at the end of the day, we are sitting on the sidelines where this stuff is happening anyway, right? We're not controlling. Well, let's park the multinational agency conversation for another time. I think what I'm interested in, which kind of got my ears pricked up when you mentioned it, was I think I coined it as the rise of the small agencies, right? Or rather,
Yeah.
maybe you had said it. Tell me about what's happening off the back of this headless chook movement of the big network agencies. What's the impact? And to preface it by saying there's always been boutique agencies, there's always been small
Yeah.
agencies, but how has the movement taken advantage? I don't know if that's the right word because I don't know what's happening there. But what is happening with these guys? How are they gathering their troops to go? All right, let's do this. They fucking don't know what they're doing.
So I think to get into that very quickly from the big agencies, when I'm contracting with them, sometimes you'd have one creative team and you'd have about five strategists. And I
Right.
think some of the brand side clients are getting over the fact that it's just, what are we paying for again? Because you're never going to get those strategists aligning. You're never going to get the work out the door. You're just going to get decks that never see the light of day. And I think there's started to be some atrophy. Sorry, I've got to close my door because it's a steam vent. The thing in New York is that half of the buildings are still steam activated, which went out of style in the 1930s anywhere else. It's a broken city. Anyway, I think all of that's happening, and they're like, "What have we got out of our $1 million? A couple of decks." And so they're moving to these small agencies. And I saw a really nice campaign that I thought was from a medium-sized agency, and I sent an email to them the other day, and they're like, "I'm sorry, we're just three creatives." And another one, I saw a guy that I worked with recently on a pitch, and he worked with a very small startup. It sounded like sort of four or five people, and I did this big, massive campaign that just went everywhere for power and beautiful production values. And it's really just one strategist, couple of creatives, and an MD to hold the client's hands. So I think there is a rise of that. Like you look at, I was Shark Day for a few years, and you see a lot of people exiting that shop and setting up like what's it called, the flower shop, and all sorts of other stuff. You also see there's a small shop called something like Atlantic that was out of a barge for a while down in Red Hook, and now they've got actual offices because it's probably working out of a ship's
So,
too cold in winter. But all I
so
mean
let, just
quickly,
to
yeah, carry on.
no, so sorry to interject. What I was trying to say, that kind of stuff has been happening a lot in Asia, Southeast Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, places like that. And maybe because you work in New York and you're accustomed to working with the big agencies, a lot of this are happening in the wings, and you don't feel it. Maybe you're feeling it a lot more now. In Asia, and again, I'm speaking mostly a lot from experience in Singapore. That has been a movement for the longest time. Whether or
Yeah,
not they're making the same kind of bucks as the big agencies, that's not the point. The point is that movement has always been there. You're probably becoming more aware, certainly in the way the job market is going right now, and noticing it a lot more. And when you said, I called them up and they're just three creatives and an MD or whatever you just said, to us, I'm not going to say it's not surprising, but there's a lot of it out there. I wouldn't say it's saturated. I mean, Singapore is a small market, 4 or 5 million people, and there is enough to make to get to get going to compete. Maybe not
right.
competing directly at a financial level, but it happens. So to make the question more pointed, are you seeing the small agencies in places like New York now
Yeah,
competing with those other guys?
yeah, I am. And it's interesting because when I got here 10 years ago, the smallest you could be was about 25 people because the amount
Right.
of hoops you had to jump through, the amount of shaking hands and vesting and interests and all that sort of stuff. Even with a pitch consultant, they'd want to know that you've done $25 million dollars of business. I think all of that stuff is starting to, like, some of the campaigns I'm seeing that are getting PR are done by like we had an agency and a couple of others, and it's
Mm.
really interesting that they don't mind not taking that risk. I think risk is the wrong word, but able to cut through the amount of money that multinationals are stripping out of the budgets and going, let's go with these guys that have had a track record with doing good work in prior lives, you know?
So then, last question for this particular topic, because New York is the head offices for a lot of the big companies.
Right.
Do they give do they give a shit? Or
About
are they showing that they're giving a shit, or are they
about
just
cre-
business as
about
usual?
creativity, about creativity, or
You
about
tell me how you want to interpret that question. It's more. I guess I was saying more from bottom line, but I hope they're one and the same in some way.
I think it's driven by bottom line. I think it's driven by bottom line that procurement on the client side is getting tighter, ever decreasing circles, just like agency side, ever decreasing circles. And they're like, what have we got for our, I don't know, $3 million credit development? We haven't got a whole lot of anything. So in certain, and I imagine in some of them, they're still very sort of risk adverse, and like the big banks or whatever, it's just like, no, we need to have this
Yeah.
vested interest. But in the smaller companies, and when I say smaller, they're still behemoths compared to even Europe and the UK, are going, we actually want to make work on sensible budgets, and we want one strategist, and we want to actually get the work out within 6 months. And I think there's been I could be wrong, but from everything that I'm hearing, there's starting to be a little bit of a return to that, which could also unlock more creativity. Because the one thing I think that even like Singapore or Australia, New Zealand don't understand is that you can get to 2 years on a brief here. Like you can get to 100 rounds of work over 2 years in a
Mm.
single brief before anything's action. And I went to one agency with a boss, and I was like, I want to do my aim is to do 3 pieces of work a year. And she starts laughing at me. And like in any other market, like doing 3 pieces of work, I'm not saying book worthy, but just 3 pieces of work. That sounds reasonable. But like in the US, because of the amount of players and the amount of cogs, like you can be up to 2 years on a single brief for sure.
I, I don't think we're going to get into this particular bit of this conversation, but when you say this, the first thing that comes to mind is this is why agencies in New York are charging as much as they're charging because of the retainer size. And that seems to still, it sounds like even though it's a waning scale, it sounds like the retainer based business for big agencies at least is still what's keeping the lights on. And it doesn't seem to be going to change anytime soon.
No, 100% that. Yeah, agreed.
And And that's why the spillover offices are feeling it. That's what essentially, if again, I'm just speaking based on my opinion. If you've got that type of demeanor in how you conduct business in places like New York, it's no wonder that your retainer bill gets squeezed down to such levels where big agencies in other markets like APEC markets like Singapore, they suffer and they go, well, fuck, it's your problem. You deal with it. And how they deal with it is, let's cut some people. Not to say that cutting is not happening on your side, and we're going to get to that. But anyway, that's the way I've been seeing it from talking to you about this stuff in the past. Let's
No,
kind of take
interesting.
a bit
Yeah.
of a yeah. It's okay. So um, a bit of a little bit of a breather in terms of I don't want this to all be about serious stuff, but we talked a little about you are originally a Kiwi, you are now a U.S. citizen.
Hmm.
I was
That is
about to
true.
say God save the king, but it's obviously not. Um,
Oh,
or
I'm
can I
becoming
say that? Okay,
that.
I'm not gonna go there. Yeah.
It's becoming that.
Okay. Um, So, ad school. I guess I want to talk about
Right.
maybe 5 minutes and changing topic. I want to
Uh-huh.
talk a little bit about ad school. Um, Let's talk a little bit about the experience of ad school, more in terms of because I'm trying to do this from a community point of view, and want to put clips out to talk to creatives and strategists and all the rest of these types of people who need to understand the merits of having that type of post-grad background that we've had from
Right.
ad school point of view.
Right.
And Saatchi's Wellington, really, how we get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we did, what did we do? A 1 year course, which is, it's still being offered. It's being run by Kate Humphreys now, right, in Auckland,
Yeah.
MDS, Media Design School. And it's funny because I feel like there's a lot of ad creatives that are coming into the foray from the sidelines. So they're a designer or they're a CGI artist or they're even a brand manager and jumping into this. And I think what we had, and it was so baked into us, and I think it's a less prevalent now to actually have any sort of a tutelage going into this profession. But what we had is we got railed for a year of late nights, early mornings of what an idea was. And I think it was
Yeah.
super helpful because people that don't have that, some of them are really smart and they enter into this industry and they just get it. Like I have the guy that I mainly work with at the moment, art director, and I'm a writer. He's come from the sidelines as well. He came from doing just banner ads, and he's very good. He's better than me, and he
Mm.
just gets it. But for every one of him that there isn't, are a lot of people that just don't get the structure and the basics because we're sweating the annuals, We were getting like every day we were pinning stuff on the board and being told, that's good, that's crap, this is why it's good. It was a fun year. It was a hard year. What's your take on it?
It was the most formative part of my education, really. Um, I think if our industry wants to survive, with creative being a pivotal part of it, I think it should be the main part of it, but let's say a pivotal arm of it. If you're not cultivating the new generation, and just for people who don't understand this, Media Design School, ad school in New Zealand, was funded by CAANZ, which was Communication Arts New Zealand. So essentially, all the ad agencies in New Zealand helped fund like a feeder school. It's like a feeder school for the future creatives. Not so directly. It's a business, obviously, but they have a vested interest in it. In fact, at the end of the school year, all the top ECD CCOs would have come to our as when you and I did our gallery session together. Saatchi Wellington came in and said, "Yeah, we like these two fuckers. Let's go." That doesn't happen. It certainly it as far as I can tell, in Singapore they have one at Ngee Polytechnic, which is a poly, and they do have that, but it's not baked into the industry in a way. It's more like this is a
Right.
business, this is what they do. It's like a photography course, and then you get out, as opposed to all the best photographers in New York have said, you know what, we want to be able to fund the next generation. Let's kind of
Right.
cultivate it. So that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in Singapore, as far as I can tell, and it certainly doesn't happen anywhere else in Southeast Asia. Besides Ad School, I know there's one in Germany, a famous school for creatives, and there's Miami Ad School, which we
Well,
all knew. I don't even know if it still exists.
yeah, it still exists. Miami Ad School, I tutored because sometimes I'll throw them into agencies. And when I was at Chai, I got lumped with a group. And it's funny because I was talking recently to a guy, and I didn't realize there was a junior team that's now actually a very awarded, well-respected team. They've gone their own ways now, but they came from Miami Ad School. And it's funny because I'm like, oh, really? Hunter and Lucas came from Miami Ad School because my Miami Ad School iteration. Because essentially, they just throw them into the agency and go, "Can you take care of this for about 4 or 5 months?" And they weren't quite of the same level. So I think Miami Ad School is almost like the Starbucks of ad creatives because you have some courses that are better than other courses, if that makes sense. Because if you look under the covers, there's Miami Ad School Minneapolis, there's Miami Ad School Miami, there's Miami Ad
Yeah, it's
School
they, they've they,
Dallas,
they've
all that sort of stuff.
they've made it into a Subway franchise.
Oh, I have, and it's almost like I had this one person once that goes, "I work at BBH London," and I was at a party in London. And I was like, "Oh shit, this is a really good creative." And then it turns out later on in the night, so he mentioned someone else. He actually worked at BBH Milton Keynes, which is like kind of the holding pen for.
I
And it's just like,
I did not know Milton Keynes
yeah,
of all places would have its own BBH.
yeah. There's a
That
BBH Milton Keynes.
BBH has always been famously. I know they're owned by publicists, but famously independent in terms of they don't have a lot of offices, right? If you look at their website, or the last time I checked their website, they've got like 7 locations, and I
Right,
don't
right.
recall besides London and Milton Keynes. But I get your point. They're
Well,
satellite offices.
yeah. Right, right. Things that they don't want on their map. Can you imagine
Like,
the map of BBH and it's got London and then what's this little
but
dot there?
isn't it true? We all have this impression that BBH are not like the other players. It's not like Gray or Saatchi's
But
or
like
MNC.
wide,
They're not saying, look, we've got 100, or like there are two
yeah,
ways of impressing
Wyden as
clients.
well.
Let's
That's
say
the other one. Yeah, that's
there
true.
there are two
Yeah,
ways
Wyden and
of impressing
BBH.
clients.
That's
You
true.
show them that you have offices everywhere, But BBH and Wyden, you're right, are one of the few that didn't do that, which is why that really surprised me. I have to look into that. Milton Keynes BBH. What kind of black sheep do they
Yeah.
have? Do they have real black sheep out there? Anyway, look, I really want to get to this topic because I think it's so juicy
Sure.
and I've been salivating it and wanting to get to this. So I'm calling this part our community, right?
Uh-huh.
So it is long. We've had these conversations, and I'm just gonna rattle out what I've got written, and feel free to elaborate on it as you want to. So there's three
Sure.
topics in this section.
Hmm.
Number one, I've written it down as when respect in the industry is no longer afforded. Where and who are the Jerry graphs of this year? Next topic, the flattened structure between an ECD level in New York City and the big markets. And the last one is awards versus hardworking work in the US. What
Yeah.
do you say about that? Lump it in, jump around if you need, but essentially, I'm
I
really
think I can
interested in
lump
finding
on the
out.
first two. I can lump on the first two and then spend a little bit more time on the last. But yeah, I mean, it's just like respect. Like when we grew up, like 20 years ago, it was like very much like that's that guy. Even in New Zealand, it'd be like, there's Micah Sullivan and he's drinking over there. And there was like some sort of cachet and beauty to lauding these almost like celebrity culture of advertising creatives that were multi-awarded. And as we grow up and grow on, I don't think generation cares. And there's certainly not the same level, at least in New York, of that person who did all of this amazing work, and I know him. And it just isn't really there. And I find it's sad, but that's just a state of reality where, at least in New York, there's not a lot of socializing. You occasionally do it at a production company, but hardly ever. And there's no sort of cross conferring of what happened and what came out, and a little bit through a couple of the sites, but there isn't this lauding of these are the figures that are crafting the industry. It's just not really there anymore. And I don't know, what's your take in Singapore? Do you still have all these known figures that people respect in 2025 and know, or is it mainly for the older people?
Um, what I would say is, okay, I think the best way to describe it to you would be New Zealand. Okay, New Zealand being remember Singapore is 5 million, just like New Zealand. In markets like that, certainly markets where people see it as this is the holy grail of my second part of my career. You've got, and with all due respect to the peers that we have in New Zealand and also my current peers in Singapore, there are a lot of hanger-ons. You've got your usual suspects. One of the reasons, I don't know about you, but one of the reasons I left in 2006 was how the hell am I going to get a promotion when the same 20 people are just playing musical chairs
Yeah,
in New Zealand?
it's true.
And that I think 10% changes, and it's very much regimented in that way also in Singapore. You've got your usual suspects, and they're going to do the rounds. I'm not saying they're necessarily hopping into bed every year or anything like that, but when you've got they've cornered the market. They've cornered the market. The best of the best are here already, and we know how to play the game. We're going to play this game together. And much
Right.
like how they do in New Zealand, in Singapore, it happens the same way. Again, I'm not saying there's not new talent from my generation that have come up, but there are a lot of and this is not to say they don't have the talent, but it's very hard to see a new superhero. We don't have a lot of new
Right.
superheroes.
Well, jumping from that point, and almost jump to the second point slightly, where in New York, there's such a flattened structure, and it's to the point that you just mentioned in Singapore and Southeast Asia, in that you're an ECD and you're multi-awarded, and you're either very talented or you're lucked out to be on a bunch of campaigns that have gone around the world. And then below the ECD, quite often, at least in New York agencies, they flatten everything. So a junior almost has the same rating as a CD. The CD generally, I mean, not all agencies, but a lot of them, the CD will feed into the ECD just the same, even a GCD, the same as a junior. And I think it's kind of an interesting structure because it's like, well, hang on, like, shouldn't there be I can take care of this account and I can feed into you and talk into the ECD. But they like to keep it flat because then there's no chance of a CD taking their job or a GCD taking their job, is my understanding. But I've been in a
Ah,
couple of,
okay.
yeah, but I've been in a couple of agencies and it's a very weird structure because it's like, okay, you've got 40, 50 creators underneath the ECD and
Mm.
all of them are on the same level. But that's fucking odd because someone's got 6 months in the tree, other people have run accounts and had 20 years and a bunch of international whatevers, but they're almost on the same level, which is all very odd sometimes. But I honestly feel in New York, the reason for that is insecurity and paranoia that if everyone's flattened below me, then I'm top dog and I can
Yeah.
keep that level away from me so no one can start to reach up and start to whisper in an MD's ear going, I can fucking do that job. I can do the ECD's job. So,
So, so, so is this a realization you've had in the last 10, just recently, or in the last 10 years you've been in New York?
No, I mean very prevalent in the last 7 years, but it's kind of interesting where, I mean, in some ways it's liberating. You get a junior presenting their script work beside a CDs in the same meeting room at the same level of respect. That's quite liberating. But at the same
Mm.
point, it's just like, well, why don't you just stock them up all with juniors then? Because you're paying this guy, 1,400 a day. You're paying this person 200 a day. Like what? But I think it just comes from insecurity. It's just like I don't want anyone to take my job, so I've got to depress all the ranks below me. Yeah.
I think that is a unique scenario that happens in New York. We don't quite have that in Singapore. Let's say,
Right.
and maybe it's because we don't do the same kind of billings. I mean, yes,
Could be.
Singapore is an APAC country, and we do take care of, like your Malaysia and Thailand, and all. It is central, or it
Right.
used to be at least traditionally centralized. So what it does is it takes away a little bit of that kingdom power
Mm.
in Singapore. But my question to you then is, you haven't always worked in New York. You've worked in London before New York, and you've done stints in Africa. You've done stints in Saudi Arabia and also New Zealand.
Right.
Are you saying it's a unique US problem, or
I
not
wouldn't.
not a
I wouldn't even
problem?
say. I wouldn't say unique US problem. I'd say unique New York problem. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't operate that like that in LA, from what I've heard. Certainly doesn't operate that in ancillary markets like Chicago and below. It's a lot more normal there. New York's its own beast. New York's also its own beast in terms of when they say, the city that never sleeps, that also applies to work. So just the amount of hours. I mean, we've all seen in agencies, probably Singapore as well, where it's just like, oh, Jesus Christ, another midnight finish. But you don't generally see people being admitted to hospital through overwork and stuff like that, which I've seen a couple of times. So, yeah,
We,
it's
we do get a
just
bit of that. We do
okay,
get a bit of
fair.
that too.
Okay, I don't want to charge honor
No, no,
Singapore
no.
Stacey, but but all I mean to say is, New York's a curious beast. Like when you come here, you're like, holy shit, this is intense. And it doesn't make the work any better, but there's just an incredible amount of politics, an incredible amount of go again at midnight, just an incredible amount of things that you got to duck and weave. That's almost more important than the actual work. The amount of people that ECDs and CCOs that aren't any good here, quite a few, but because they had to do the politics and duck and weave through all of it, and they're client facing, that's the other thing. That's it's helpful in any market, but especially here, it's just everything. Yeah, being client facing.
So, like, as a Kiwi originally in the melting pot city that never sleeps, New York. Obviously, New York attracts a lot of foreign talent in our industry, and off the back of what you just mentioned, um, and feel free to abstain from how you want to answer this based on what you want out there.
Mm.
Do you think a lot of, because in hand to heart, if you ask me, hey, what is the holy grail place to work in advertising to show that you've kind of made it? I guess I would say New York. New York seems to be one of those places you would say, if that's your jam, that's the kind of place you would want to go to. As a result of it, a lot of people like yourself these ECDs and CCOs that you've mentioned are not all Americans. I'm sure a lot of the American ones keep a stronghold in, based on what you're saying, the way they want to control the teams and things.
Right.
Do you think
Yeah, quite a
foreign talent? Do you think the foreign talent who are going over there because they've been tapped on the shoulder to say, "Hey, Jonathan, you're fantastic. You should be our ECD of this place in New York. Fuck the place you're in. This is where you need to be." Do you think that has an adverse effect? Because at the end of the, and one last point before I finish the question, do you think it's because a lot of those people get their tap on their shoulder because they've played the politics in order to get to that point to begin with?
Yeah, there is some of that for sure. You know, it's definite. I will say that there's actually, in terms of CCOs here and people that are quite high up the chain, there is actually more international flavor than you expect. There is, oh, you know, a bunch of Brazilians, actually quite a few Australians at the top role, and then you have some Americans as well. Um, it is generally, have you been attached to a multi awarded campaign, and then you can jump up the charts pretty quickly? And or do you just know how to play politics really, really, really well? And you know,
What's the
not even at the
skew?
I
What's the skew?
don't know,
I,
50
I,
50,
I am
50
really.
50.
That's
Yeah,
significant.
50, yeah, 50% of, in my mind, CCOs are like fucking amazing, like cowering in the room. Oh, wow, you know, you're really good. I'm gonna have to work super hard just to not make a fool of myself. 50% of them are there through politics and actually not particularly good creatives. But, and you know this, and you know, creatives talk when we do get together of who's the good ones and who's the shit ones. But yeah, there's CCOs and significant agencies in New York that aren't any good. But you know that obviously they would never admit to it. But in somewhere like New Zealand, I think it's a lot more. If you're not very good, you'll get found
Oh
out a
yeah,
lot easier because every single piece of work's displayed and every single piece of work's PR'd. And if
yeah.
you're not incredibly good, you're probably going to get the chop pretty quickly. Less so in New York. Yeah,
In Singapore, it's the same in terms of you can't hide if you're bad because there's only so many agencies and so many people. The aforementioned people who are, very much have always they're the staple of the industry out there.
right.
But what I don't think I don't think in general in Singapore it suffers so much in terms of shit people who are hiding behind things. It's these guys work their asses off. But remember,
Mm,
Singapore instills that upon you. Singapore is the kind of place, even if you've never been, you know a little bit about what I mean by saying that. The type of
right, right,
people
right,
who
right.
are going to survive in a place where the labor laws are not quite the same. These are expats and they're there and they're making a lovely living and they want to do the best in order to keep the best. So it's not quite the
Interesting.
same.
Yeah,
There's less. I found we had less shit talking behind the backs of people we thought were useless. A lot of times it was, yeah, that wasn't good, or that was, a
right,
shit
right.
job. But it,
Well,
it was never about competent. Let's put it as a competency has never really been the cornerstone of the gossip, let's say.
I see. Yeah, no, there's some here, and there are some charlatans. There's this one who is super high up there, and every day Ad Age comes out at 5 a.m. with a few fucking articles from some sort of random pseudo journalists. And then in the meeting, every time you'd have a meeting, he didn't realize that I got his little Enigma code book as to how he got to where he is. And he's a super charismatic guy, roid rage, all that sort of stuff, looks like an Adonis, and he comes to the room every single meeting, he goes, "Oh, that's nice. What about da 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 da?" It's really just the articles from that age. He's read them in the gym, and he's like, "I'm
Mm.
going to use that in my meetings." And it's like once you could figure that out, you're like, "This guy is a complete Emperor's New Clothes." Like all he's doing, it's almost like that someone that says something profound to you, and because I've heard it on a podcast, it's like
Mm.
I've heard it on Joe Rogan, and I say this little quote. It's like, "Yeah, fuck you. I heard that on Joe Rogan as well." It's amazing. And that was his breadth of thinking up ideas was literally just ad age articles, nothing else. I'd love to just for 2 minutes super quickly talk about awards versus hardworking work in the US. I find
Yeah,
this really interesting because, like, in Singapore, New Zealand, Australia, to a degree, the UK, if you win international awards and you win Cannes in one show, you're validated as being a gifted, great creative. And it's to a degree true in the US, but certainly less true. It's hard to explain this point, but I have a couple of friends, and they're like 10 years younger than me. They're like early mid 30s. And they have a bunch of really nice, big budget broadcast with all the bells and whistles and media stuff that goes down from there into social for a lot of big brands, and they would never get awarded at the main internationals. But it's hard to explain. That stuff carries more cachet in getting your next job in the US than it does going, I got a silver lion for this, random direct piece, which is a mailer that eats itself or something like that. Like it's hard to explain that awards certainly help in the US, but they're not nearly like if you go into a job in New Zealand or Australia or parts of Asia, I'd imagine, and once again I'm putting words into your region's mouth, but like if you go, I come with 12 lines, it's like, here, have the job. But in the US, it doesn't hurt, but it's like, where's your big hardworking campaigns that aren't shit? It's a lot more of that flavor here, which is kind of interesting because it's
I
like,
I love that because in many ways it's I wish my market was more like that. I know they say the grass is greener on the other side. Um,
right,
for the how about this, the last half of my so I spent my time in Singapore between 2006 and I left in 2018. The second half of my time there, as you know, I kind of left the full-time role. I started a consultancy and I was coming in essentially like a troubleshooter, not so much like essentially I created to be a freelancer, a freelance creative director or whatever it was. But I ended up going in certainly at many times I was going in and it didn't take me very long to realize, oh shit, I'm here because the regular team doesn't know how to hack it. And
no, yeah,
there was this not to say that the people who are there were big award-winning people, but they are the people, they are the employees of the company, and they're there to do a job, and they're doing this job a certain way. But then for certain things, I use the analogy of Ray Donovan, right? Sometimes you need a Ray Donovan, you need a sellsword to come in and fix shit.
right, right,
Now,
right,
what I would say to you is, I really enjoy that part of it because it's one thing, and let's be honest, if an industry lives and dies just by what awards you've got, because it's a mandate, you're not going to go very far. You've got to
right,
get in people who can do the work, right? And it's all good to be able to get someone who knows how to make a mailer burn in, or whatever the fucking thing you said. I know you use just an example, but it's all great. But do you know how to sell,
right,
arbitrarily speaking, insurance? And at the end of the day, and this kind of comes back to the beginning of the conversation a little bit, is if you don't have the right training, the right understanding of how creativity works, how to it's about solving a problem. It's not about here's a TV brief or here's a radio brief or here's a digital brief or here's a whatever brief. It's how do I make this rock turn gold or whatever it is, right?
right.
And
Mm,
there's a certain kind of training that we've had that I don't think necessarily we are passing down anymore.
right.
And I would rather, and now that I've said this, what do you think? And sorry, my buddy Paul I would rather hire those teams creators rather than award winners. Paul is agreeing with me. What Paul is saying, I think I'm echoing as well. What is the
Yeah,
point of just having people with medals? But are you
yeah.
suggesting, though, that Jonathan Horner would rather be in a world where the award is the thing that's leading him to the next job? Or is it not better to be in a situation where, you know,
Yeah, I think actually the American model is actually healthier, because like there used to be X amount of categories at Cannes. Now it's like a category for everyone, and it's just like sponsorship in a charity field, best voiceover. It's like what the hell, and then someone gets a gold lion there. So I think the awards exclusivity have kind of not become a thing for a while. But then beyond that as well, I mean, we all know it. Like I mean, you look at Dubai, I don't know if it's the case there anymore, but it used to be you'd have creatives in the Dubai offices that were ones that were hired to do the day-to-day work, which is to do the ads, and then the ones that are just to do proactive ideas to win campaigns and tied up with to do sort of award-winning work, and tied up with that, let's be honest, there's a fair amount of scam because it's just as we see in certain markets, it's just like those things kind of don't really see the light of day, or it's like sent to one billboard hoarding that's been put up at midnight and taken a photo of and taken down again. Um, in the US, there's a lot less of that. There's a couple of people that do it, but in the US, scam usually is bad, and you generally don't want to be doing it, which is kind of interesting as well. But all I mean to say is, there was this friend I was helping out a week ago in her house, and she's got a super hot book, and she's like all the best agencies, Mother Anomaly, now she's BBDO. And I look at her work, and I'm like, I don't think she's won a single international award. And then you put her book beside mine, and I've won a few, significant international awards. And I'm like, I know who's way more hireable. It's not the fact that she's younger. It's not just the fact that she's a female. It's the fact that all of her work are these big campaigns that are hardworking but are good. And I'm like, I know what an American recruiter and what an American agency would prefer, that
Mm.
versus six gold lions. It's like night and day. But it's hard to get that perception to some of the other markets where it's like, I've won a gold lion. It's like, I'm God. And it's like, it doesn't always translate like that.
The funny thing about all this, you sitting in the belly of the beast in terms of this is where you've got your one show happening. Like the big cities, you've got your Londons. I know you worked in London as well, and I hope we get to that London topic. You worked in London, you worked in New York. These are the places where we go to Cannes, France, whatever it is.
Right.
And it's ironic that the birth of, let's say, one show in this case is the same town where they go, yeah, you know what, that's for the tourists in a way. Like in terms of, you come to New York and you're here for the award shows, get the fuck
In
out,
a
we've got
way,
work to do. I find that
in a
interesting.
way. Yeah, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. If you got a couple of like whatever's like, if you're super water, it certainly wouldn't help. It doesn't hurt, but it's also like it's hard to explain. So the right types of awards as well. It's just like if I've got this fringe little thing that you can almost smell as awards bait, and I'm from the back of whatever. Like I'm going to be contentious here, but there's a small agency called We Are Believers in New York, and they're
Hmm.
staffed by mainly Latino creators. And every year there's like one show pencil and fucking gold line, all that sort of stuff. And it's all this stuff that's never really fucking happened. Like this, I had one for Corona, which was fishing tournament where we'd reduce plastic waste by fishing stuff out of or whatever. And a beautiful case study. And went all around the world and it's gold this, gold that. And it's like, yeah, look, you didn't really do that. You didn't. Oreo Vault. I don't know if you've looked up close at that case
I've seen
study,
that,
and
yeah.
everyone thinks it's like 15 feet tall and looks like the Seed Vault in Reykjavik. Number one, they just copied the Seed Vault in Reykjavik, so they haven't even got a design to do it. But if you look close at the artwork, and they blur the corners, but some of them they don't, it's actually just a foot and a half tall. It's a model. They just put it on some fucking snow in the background. It's not actually a proper structure. It's like the sort like it comes up to my knee, if that. And it's just like all of this sort of horseplay. And some agencies will be okay, but then some of them you have that versus like a really sweet campaign for Panera, a really sweet campaign for Verizon. As long as it's good enough, like rather than just a celebrity saying a bunch of puns, if it's a really good campaign with an idea, that'll win every time. And most of these big US agencies, rather than
So in Southeast Asia, for the most part, we kind of killed that. I feel. Certainly when I first moved to Singapore back in '06. there was a lot of that horseplay. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Singapore, even to your ears, would have been one of those markets where a lot of people are doing hanky-panky campaigns just to get into award books. Um, Certainly, that has. I want to say, I don't know, but I want to say it's very much been eradicated. That way of doing things has very much been eradicated.
Oh, that's good
uh,
then.
and,
That's
and
good.
and
Yeah.
and certainly in Indonesia. Again, it's like the upside down, or whatever the saying is from that TV show, Stranger Things. It feels like New York is kind of is going through a resurgence of the stuff that we were going through 10 years ago in terms of the way to get noticed. And I say that because you made this earlier point, which is um, when your superior scoffed at you when you said I want to come up with three pieces of work, not even award winning pieces of work.
Right.
I wonder if
Free. Yeah.
that's why it's happening, because you've got this desperation happening in that market where you go, well, fuck, I can't be stuck to BH or VML or whoever whoever it is for
Right.
3 years just to get
Right.
one piece of work out. I've got to do this. I wonder
So
if
I have this friend, and
is that a new thing?
I think it's been going on for a while, and I think other markets don't even understand the difficulty, especially in New York, of trying to get work out. I have this one friend, Michelle. She's now righted herself, and she's GCD at Rethink Toronto. Oh man, I've got feedback now. And it's really good. And but I can remember when she left New York and she went to Toronto. Everyone's like, "Where's your Super Bowl spots? Where's your big stuff?" And she's like, "You don't get it. Like." uh, Half the teams don't make anything. And so even to make anything, even if it's dog shit, that's almost our own Cannes Lions. Like it's like, I've got a piece of work, even if it's awful, even if it's who's the guy that's used all the time, like Shaquille O'Neal. Let's say he's just like holding a pizza and going, get your pizza. And it's like, I made a piece of work. It's almost like your own bronze lion or your own sort of whatever to even make anything. And she struggled when she first got back to Canada. And thankfully, she's all on her feet and she's going great guns and making a bunch of beautiful work now. But I think Canadians don't understand. They're just like, well, you get the money, you get the brief, you're in the agency, you make the work. And it's like, no, it's not like that in New York. It's like, so that's why it's even more exalted when you're part of a few teams that you do get to make the work and you make something good and you make something good for a big brand. It's just like that's the honey pot, that's the sweet stuff, you know.
Um, it's interesting in terms of the power of the award. And by the way, actually, before I continue, is it because you're speaking from a freelance creative director? Are you talking about full time as well, or is it both?
Both. Yeah,
Wow.
both. Because I've been on both sides of that equation. So yeah,
Okay, so,
yeah,
so then just to keep New York, let's keep North America on one side for a second. Go
yeah.
back, go back 10 years when you were working in London. How long were you in London? How long were you working in London?
4 years, 4.5 years. Yeah,
How do you contrast the two?
yeah. It's tricky. It's like I'm in London. I think the brand managers do champion the idea a little bit more. Like
Right.
even when back then I was an art director, and back then I was still drawing scamps. Like you draw the artwork to sell them the idea. And I'm sure that's probably fallen away by the wayside in the last 10 years. But I mean, you come to America, and when I made the move back to being copyright because I'm like, my math skills just simply aren't good enough for a final comp at a presentation stage at the because Americans can't understand. It's like, what's this drawing? Like they just couldn't get the bridge. And I think there's a little bit of that when I was in the Middle East and Saudi. There's a bit of that as well. You can't present a drawing. They're like, what is this? What is this drawing? Even if you had supporting visuals. So in ways like that, there's whenever I spoke to a brand manager and whenever you are vested interest with a brand manager or a CMO or whatever in London, and even as a freelancer, occasionally you're introduced to those conversations. I felt generally in London, UK people on the client side got it more as to what an idea was, why the idea serviced the promotion of selling more shit for their brand. I got to be honest, a lot more in the US. I find people have come from anything but like a marketing or a agency background, that they come from data or they come from product, or because you also have to remember is that there's like this meme where the C-suites gather. When I say C-suite, like COO, CCO, CSO, CTO, and they all gather at the table, and there's one that's dressed in a clown outfit, and that's a CMO. So they respect the CMO about, and we're not talking all brands, like, obviously Liquid Death is a startup through ex-ad people, but someone like that, obviously everything is marketing. But if you go below that to your Campbell's Soup or your Boeing or whatever, the CMO is always the laughing stock in the room out
Right.
of all the C-suite. So, well, it's just that's how it works. It's just like they're the little kids at the big person's table. The CMO is never respected. And I don't
Sorry,
know if it's the same around. What's
are
that?
you talking about London now, or have you switched to Saudi Arabia and
Well, okay,
which one are
so
you talking
I'm talking in general. I'm talking in general that
about?
the CMO is always the least respected C-suite person at the boardroom table. It's always been that case. Yeah, I mean, look, there's memes about it. It's not like I'm not coming up with this stuff, but it's just that's just the reality. And the reason why I say that and getting it back to, because you're talking about London versus the US, is that, well, what falls under the person that's respected the less in their department? And in the UK, I think it is people generally, at least in my 4.5 years of working on clients and agencies and yada yada, they generally get wh why creativity matters, what's that in service of, and what's the long game to sell more shit, because that's what we're doing here. And I got to be honest, like the people that fall underneath the CMO and the US side, like, I think some of them come from data, and some of them know this shit. But like the amount of times that you present to these quite senior people, and you get that they have no idea how to assess an ad, and they don't even, you know, they don't even know where to start. Like it happens all the time.
So we've gone back to a competency conversation, okay? And I think
Right.
I'm assuming this is a CMO competency conversation, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, senior people underneath the CMO, but yeah, sure, why not?
sure. Maybe it's just me, but North America, specifically North America, you've got your who was that guy? The Burger King, that Latin
Uh,
guy. I forgot. Like
yeah,
he was this big character CMO
superstar.
who kind of
Yeah. I
ch-
can't even remember. I can't even
whatever.
remember now, but yeah, yeah, yeah.
And certainly, let's say from a media perspective, the way we understand the dynamic between agencies and clients,
Mm,
and it doesn't. It's not too far off from how it mirrors in certainly Singapore, and I would say very much in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, where whether the label is a CMO, that's beside the point, but the main client essentially, they hold all the cards. Is
right.
it more about because the term you used and the reason my ears pricked up, the term you used was they're the joke in the room. What did you mean by that? Are you saying it's a lack of power or the fact that they don't know what the hell is going on?
No, they're just not that respected. It's like, I mean, you, once again, I'm not making this up. I'm not trying to make an agenda, but it's just like in any C-suite meeting, and you got the CEO down and they're going around the boardroom. They'll spend half of the 60 minutes talking to the CTO about the product development and all that sort of stuff, and literally marketing. Okay, CMO, you got 3 minutes, go. Like that's just how it works. I'm not smack talking a profession. I'm not smack talking whatever. The CMO is way down the charts of any C-suite organization in a big structure in the US. I don't know how it works in other
What about
markets, but in terms of
London?
corporate New York,
What
well,
about
all I
London?
mean to say is, maybe it's the same in London, but at the same time, at least people, because we're talking about almost two separate points. It's just the role of C-suite, CMOs inside an organization, and then the second point is how competent they are to understand what an idea is and understand that the agency is trying to help them. In London, I found there's a lot more people, a lot more competent, a lot more ad centric talking about getting what ideas are and getting how not only we're working together, but getting what they are. In the US, oh my God, there's just that's because it's just there's something in the fruit bowl. It's like there's a level of corporate malaise where they've played a good game to get into the stream, but then you even ask them sometimes it's like, which one of these do you like? And they can't even say that, you know, or you even go, what should it be more like? They can't even say that. It's just it's wild to some of the people on the client side that are in positions that they shouldn't be because they've come from a data or just a strictly marketing. If you've only done marketing and marketing and advertising, and obviously get conflated, but for me, they're two radically different professions. And you've never had any training as to what an ad is, and you're asking to be making decisions on it, then usually you're going to be either saying stuff that's irrelevant, or you're going to be saying something that isn't true, or you're just. But you have to say something because you have to be in a position of expertise or a position of I own the agency. But it's wild some of the brand managers that exist in the US on major brands. It's and you can't say anything because it's the other thing. Like I feel like in Singapore or Australia, New Zealand, you can call them out and you can be like, "That's wrong because of this and this." But how about we get something that's right? You don't want to pay them out, but you're like, "Let's get to a point that's whatever." The way American corporate works is you can never say to a client they're wrong. Like, you know, good luck to you. Like it's just that's not going to work. So it's
Well,
trying to
I don't
navigate through
think
all of that.
I don't think it's so much about telling a client they're wrong. I don't think it's really our place to be saying you're wrong, but I do agree that we should be able to have a healthy debate about it. To say,
Yeah,
yeah, but why do you think this is that way? As opposed to shut the fuck up, you don't know what you're talking about.
no,
We're
it's
never going
true,
to go there.
and yeah, no, that's true. But all I mean is, even that healthy debate, be careful how that's couched, because yeah, it'd be really interesting. Obviously, you couldn't do this because it's like NDA's out the window. But it's like if you could be a fly on the wall on some of these corporate advertising meetings in the US, of which sometimes there's up to 40 people in the room. Um, It'd be wild for someone from. It's not like I'm saying, "Oh, you're a small market, you don't know any of this," but it's just like, it'd be wild for a fly on the wall to see what goes on in some of these meetings and see how even a robust backwards and forwards can't really happen without bad things happening as a repercussion at the back end. Yeah,
I, I can only attribute it to the fact that you guys have so many layers in the New
yeah.
York
There's a lot of
advertising
layers.
structure, right?
There's a lot of
It's easy
layers.
to it's like a yeah it's very easy to fall behind different firewalls and you don't know
Yeah,
what's actually happening. It's essentially that losing touch with what's happening on the ground with your team, with your agency, right?
yeah, yeah,
That must factor in. See, in Singapore again, because Singapore is a 5 billion population market, we again, no CMO's perfect as much as no agency is perfect. There should be a healthy debate anyway, right?
mm,
Sometimes the CMO has a point that we just have to understand the point they're trying to make, get on their page, but at least there's that duality there, right? We can work together on it. But you're right. Sorry, but what I like is because let's say CMO X in a for let's call it Coca-Cola in Singapore, if they have a problem, we can talk it out because the agencies are compact. They're not 5-story building agencies and uh, a corner building on a in Manhattan or
right,
wherever they are, right?
mm,
So you can
right.
control those variables.
Yeah, I mean
I don't know.
that's the worst part of American corporate culture is that you can't have those conversations. Like, I mean, maybe the introduction of these smaller agencies means like, okay, I'm a vested interest in my own company. I can have those conversations, and I'm an intelligent person not to, enough to. But like, if you're a part of a big multinational, no, you can't really have those conversations. That happens at the CCO level. If you have them further down, number one, the person on the client call who has 10 other people on the call from their side vying for their blood in one capacity or the other, they have to present such a sort of a stone face that they're not gonna even want to get into this sort of open conversation without it being documented, without something happening. They wouldn't, they just wouldn't do that. And then number two, you probably get paid out afterwards on the agency side. Why are you trying to talk through changing a strategic shift on a call with a client in real time at a CD level. Like that's not going to happen.
So then look, then coming back to the top of the conversation, because we started with the small agencies and the rise of the small agencies in New York in the face of the consolidation of big network agencies.
Right.
So then with this new lens, does it make a difference for the small agencies in terms of it's still same CMOs.
Yeah.
So then do they have a better time at it?
Look, I think the rise of the small agencies usually happen because there's a friendship that's been established by someone in the small agency with someone high up in the brand level or the CMO. And because that happens, then what can happen is the whole look, why is Wyden now? Wyden is Wyden because of one friend and another friend. One had a shoe business startup, one had an ad agency, and they were friends first and foremost. So then they can just have that open conversation going, you should do this, you should do this. And then if there starts to be politics or corporate stuff coming in the way, you just phone up your friend and you're like, stop fucking around, let's do this. And it's amazing. And there might be unearthing a new spirit of smaller agencies actually doing good work. But yeah, we can't forget that, Wyden's independent and Wyden started because Dan Wyden was friends with Phil Silver that started Nike, and it's just everything happened from that point. And I think that's the only reason why there's a 3, 4 person shop doing these big, massive campaigns is they haven't door knocked and they're like, oh shit, small little shop with some cool work. There'll be a friendship, there'll be a relationship already established there. That's 100% how they've got in.
Okay, so look, I think I know, and I haven't answered this question, but I want to hear your opinion based on someone who's worked in everywhere from New Zealand to London to New York. Do you think there's going to be another Wyden Kennedy anymore? In the sense, it's not about. I don't even mean brand name. I mean a name that will ever get to, because we are now in the era of the boutiques. I think we all recognize
Right.
that, right?
Yeah.
Do you think
I mean,
boutiques are ever going to become the next Wyden anymore, or is that
yeah,
just
I mean,
not the way we're going to operate
I don't know
as
how.
an industry?
I mean, obviously, I'm not clairvoyant. I don't have a crystal ball, and also I'm not this big lauded sort of multi whatever creative. But like, I think there will be a rise of some hot shots, some boutiques. Whether they'll get, I mean, and there has been over the years, like Mad Dogs and Englishmen, all that sort of stuff. What's that one in Seattle? Something finishing school. They've existed for years and years. You have the drawing room in South Africa, and they'll continue to exist in different capacities, and it'll be like, okay, well, if it's all digital and all social, let's say that's generally the medium of the flavor of the day, then they'll still do really interesting creative work that isn't just tech led. They'll still do stuff that's idea led. Whether or not they'll enter in the same cachet of vernacular as Wyman and Kennedy, which is almost like the equivalent of what such and such in New Zealand was back in the 80s and 90s, where everyone on the street in New Zealand back in the 80s, they're like, name an ad agency. They'd only be able to name one, Saatchi and Saatchi, and it's like, name a second one. They wouldn't even be able to name Colenso. That's how it got into the households and a vernacular of what a great agency was. Um, is there going to be another one of those? Probably not, because I don't think there's the law around advertising that there used to be. There's not the long lunches. There's not the glamorous nature to advertising that there once was. And I don't think that's ever going to come back because the margins just aren't there anymore to create an environment that is this law and that creates stories as well and create along with the good work and the good stories then becomes a whole bubble of artists visiting ad agencies and all that sort of stuff. I don't think you're going to really ever see those days again. So and with that, I think you're going to get hot shops that do work, but you're not going to get, in my mind, unless money magically somehow reverses, which I don't think is ever going to happen. Um, you're not going to get the same sort of tinderbox of creativity that people lord over that enter into popular culture like you have seen over the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah, look, like before I even began, I did say I think I know the answer to this, and I agree with you 100%. I guess, and by the way, I want to address something first. Henry has put up something here. Agencies are too scared to push back on clients in fear of losing them. Most of the big winning agencies have one or two clients who are a little more adventurous, and then he adds, but the rest all walk the line of safety as no one wants accountability if it fails. What do you think?
Yeah, and Henry's in London at a good agency. He's right. Like it's same in the US. Like there's not the majority of places I've seen. Even like when I'm freelancing at small midweights, they don't want to have those conversations. Even when a client's pushing you to doing wrong solutions, or when I say wrong solutions, solutions that aren't going to benefit the end result to make it either more creative or more people to get involved. They just they you can't have those conversations. The thing is, you also have to be careful, like what we were talking before, is that Saatchi's Wellington, that was a crown jewel in the Saatchi's network back in the 80s, early 90s. And how they became unstuck is that there's one ad, you buy it or you find another agency. And I don't know if you remember that, but there was one of their edicts in the early
Yep.
90s. It's like, you buy this one, we're only presenting one piece of work, and if you don't buy it, fuck off. And guess what happened? Like a lot of the clients just went, "Well, fuck off then."
Well,
So you have to be careful how you do it, you know?
so this is the point, because we are now having this conversation. Now, here's where I'm going to bring back the topic that we discussed, that whether we should talk about for this call, and I think it's very prudent to talk about it now. There was a time when, and I've written a little bit about this on LinkedIn in the past, and maybe it's an old man thing, but there was a time when the name on your door suggested the type of work you're going to get. You mentioned this. We talked a little bit about this in the sense where if you're going to go to Saatchi's, you know you're going to get this kind of work. If you're going to go to DDB, you're going to get this kind of work. TBW does this kind of work. There was an ethos that was very much attached to what these brands used to do. Now, we don't have to dwell on that they've gone by the wayside in the way they run things. At the end of the day, we're now moving to a new format. My question is, do you think that was the beginning of the end in terms of, because by way of decisions by committee happening at boardrooms, the product you're selling is more about your rate card, and this is the best. Arbitrarily, I'm throwing it in. This is the kind of best lunch you're going to get if you're going to be with us. This is the kind of blow. I'm not going to go there.
Right. I mean,
You
I
know?
mean, I yeah, I mean, in my mind, it's like the the brands have really munitioned themselves, and by munition, it's not even in the correct sentence, but like they've really armed themselves to the teeth with what the values of their own company is before they even engage the agency. And so the agency is a lot more straitjacketed as to the tone, as to the flavor that's offered up in return. That paired with the CCO from Mother jumps to, Harvest. Harvest jumps to TBWA. And that all used to happen to a degree in a prior life, but you no longer have, it used to be like, I want a horror novel tonight, or I want a horror VHS, and you rent that out. And the horror VHS, as a mangled analogy as it is, was Saatchi's. Then you want an epic, so you rent Dr. Zhivago, and then that was BBDO. That's what they did. And they all had definite tones that were very different. And it's like, if you want a thinkly thing, then you go to those two agencies. If you want a humorous thing, you go to those two agencies. If you want something that's just radical and out of the box, you go to this one or this one. I gotta be honest, I'm not seeing outside of Mischief in New York that does, in my mind, do different work. I don't see a difference. If I was blindfolded and I didn't have any industry news, I would not be able to determine the difference between an Ogilvy ad to a BBDO ad to a 72 Sony ad these days, which I think it's kind of a shame, because it no longer implements a signature, a calling card from the agency going, if you want these types of ads, come to us and we'll do it really fucking well. I don't think that
I,
environment, at
I, I'm
least
not.
at least exists in the US.
I'm not disputing that. I think that's exactly what's happened. I think what I'm saying to you is, uh, how big a factor do you think that has played in the equity, the value proposition of agencies as from the time when that was the case to the way things are happening now. You know what I mean? I'm not disputing that. I get that. Do you think it was an inevitability
Yeah,
because of the way the markets have moved in with digital, the way that social media influences have kind of come in, or do you think it had some semblance of a stronghold if they had maintained that way of doing things?
look, I think there's about 15 points as to why agencies are in a lot weaker position than they used to be. I think that's definitely one of them, and it's one that I hadn't even considered. I also think, look, I think at the cornerstone of it, we admin were magicians. They'd perhaps overly index the fact that they could magically sell you stuff, and magically sell you stuff through a thought process that you hadn't thought of before. And this is before the internet. And this is before the rise of Photoshop. So you don't have access to any of these skills. You don't have access to your kids comping up stuff. You don't have access to generating your own line of thought. You go to the magic box, and inside the magic box is a couple of magic crayons, which is an art director and copywriter, who have done all of this amazing work, and they will come up with something amazing for you. Do you want that? Yes. Now in these days, it's just like everyone's look at this reel that my 6-year-old cut together. Look at this Photoshop that I did of a logo. So with this mass democratization of creation through tools accessible to everyone comes an erosion of a spirit of advertising where it's kind of stripped away the magic, and along with that has stripped away the respect that an agency should have been deserved, or the best asset to selling in work should be given to. And I think once that happens, then it's a dance down to the bottom. So I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think it's true. Like an erosion of points of difference um, is a core point, sure. But I think there's like a dozen points. But I think we can all agree that agency world, especially since 2008 onwards, it's not nearly as fun for the creators. The creators no longer have the sense of pride and respect and power that they used to sell in different sort of work. And that's why you see so much crappy work on TV these days, or crappy work even on billboards. Like I don't think I've even seen an out of home with an idea for the last three or
Look,
4 months in New York, you know?
I've always I've come to grips with the fact that 95% of work you're going to see in advertising, whether it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, even 30 years ago, is going to be shit. I don't have a problem with the fact that they're at the end of the day, I don't want everyone to be great. No offense. I'm trying to be selfish about this. I want to be able to be the one that comes up with the best work. I don't care. You can look at the farce that is the Super Bowl ads. In terms of what you either essentially you have to throw money at it, and you got the right celebrity in there, and you've got eyeballs anyway, right? That's the reason why the media buys so high.
Right.
I don't think that's necessarily a mark of what's a great ad, even though that sometimes makes more rounds through our community and for synergy because it's Super Bowl season, and those are the ads that everyone's talking about. I don't
Right.
think it's the same thing. And in terms of good versus, I get it. It happens.
Mm.
What I think to be objective about it, I get what we're saying about the erosion. I mean, I'm talking about it as well. The erosion of creativity and the value proposition it provides. How about this
Yeah. Yeah.
as a question? And don't bite my head off for asking this. Isn't that the cost of progress in terms of this is where we are now? This is just the way it is. Fucking get on the bandwagon or jump off.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. The problem that I've got with that is that, and I've seen this a few times, especially in agencies where they're like, the strategist can jump in on an idea and a receptionist can jump in on an idea. And in a way, it's like, it's nice to have that openness to go where ideas can come from anywhere. But I also do partly go, we're trained up as a trade, just like a plumber's trained up, just like an electrician's trained up. You wouldn't jump in after a couple of YouTube tutorials and start to stand over an electrician and tell him where to put wires or who to put wires. Because the outcome might null and void your insurance. Same thing with advertising. Yeah, everyone can have an opinion, but I also think yeah, it's to Henry's point earlier, is that everyone's scared and no one wants to really sort of stand up. I think that's true on a lot of accounts, and don't rock the boat because there's a revenue stream coming in. And then also what Freddie just said before, which is all about sort of, timing and margins. We haven't even talked about timing, but it used to be like 2 weeks for a brief, right? It'd be the first review would happen after a week and a half or something like that. Now it's like the worst I've ever had it was this dog shit agency that's meant to be good called the Community. And they'd brief you, and they'd brief you at 10 a.m. and they're like, first review 2 p.m. So you'd have to do an entire deck of ideas in 4 hours. And I'm like, when I first heard that, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, that's literally, you've got to think of ideas with your partner that makes sense in an hour, and then you need 3 hours to collaboratively make a 25 page deck. And then you get to 2 p.m. and then they'd be like, do another one, picking at 6 p.m. And I'm like, this is insanity, but this is like, I mean, that's an exaggeration, born by a fucking weird agency structure. But like, uh, I think, the whole time versus we had a week and a half to crack it and we'd fuck around and we'd talk backwards and forwards and be long days. And then this is really what's going to work. It's just, I don't know, the model's very different now.
So I don't know how long that's been the case for you in New York, but certainly in Singapore and Southeast Asia, we've been seeing those winds of change for the longest time.
Right.
I would say we were feeling that after the housing crisis,
Okay.
pretty much on our end. We started seeing a lot of that
Yeah.
in terms of, again, because you have to understand. I mentioned already, these are big hub offices that support the head office in New York or London, and usually the cuts happen at these big offices because you've got your big outside the main headquarters. You've got your biggest personalities, let's say, who are in these markets like Singapore. So they
Right.
are the fattest of the fat in that sense. So we've seen that. We've seen that trend for the longest time. It's happened long enough that we see it as a reality, and it's happened long enough that now we have gone beyond that period. Again, for Southeast Asia and Singapore, it's become the norm because you know what it is, right? You've moved the goalpost. It goes, well, Jonathan, I put a gun to his head and he did it in 3 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got 8 now, but I'll just put a gun to his head and say do it in 4.
Right.
You understand? Like there is this sense of there is a natural correlation between the bad times, and by the way, advertising has had bad times more than better times for the longest period, but there is a direct correlation between the measures that are put in place as a result of quote unquote bad times and how those structures never leave once things even out. That's what I've noticed in Asia.
Yeah.
But
Well, also, like, I mean, here I've talked about AI because AI is fucking everywhere at the moment. You can't escape it on your LinkedIn feed. But like, it's just, I had this guy recently, very awarded, smart South African creative, and he's all about like, oh, when I don't have a partner, I just plug into ChatGPT, and I haven't even downloaded ChatGPT because I must find it's like a cheat code, and I don't want to be a cheat. I'd rather just, do my own expression and actually sweat it. But he's like, yeah, and I generate and I do 50 headlines and I quickly zip through and there's 3 that work and I plug it in. So it's like, we're not even talking like 4 hours now for a writer to come up with a bunch of headlines. We're talking about, plus one doing it in 5 seconds. And that's the other thing that you got to compete against. And fine, a lot of them are going to be shit. But if you say, give me 50 and 3 are workable, that's a little bit of a moral quandary that's going on, that's happening at the moment.
And I feel the way they justify all of this is, again, isn't that the rate of progress?
Right.
I think we've talked for a long time. I do want to finish off on something that I think is related to what we're saying, which is a
Sure.
story that's happening in Singapore. And I was talking to a buddy of mine. He's now kind of retired. He's moved to Portugal, and he's not really an advertising guy. He's a strategy guy. He's not a creative guy, but I've known him probably pretty much as long as I've known you. And so we talk regularly about this and that, and advertising, obviously, because of our occupation, it comes to the front very often. And we were discussing, he's from Singapore as well. And what he was, we both had the same epiphany moment. And it was, see, the problem is you've got big agencies, and this happens in New Zealand for sure. New Zealand, I believe, have the same business model where every year 10% of people leave, right? I mean, we know
Right.
a little bit about how New Zealand works. If you don't
Yeah.
perform, it's meritocracy. If you don't perform, the bottom sliver gets kicked out. It's always been the case.
Mm-hmm.
In Singapore, what's been happening is they've taken it to a different level. So about 10 years ago, so even before 10 years ago, they were doing that, right? Let's call it the 10% rule, where at the end, at the new cycle, 10% gets
Right.
removed. The thing me and Brian, my buddy, we realized was, so it happens, it doesn't happen necessarily every year, but let's say every 2-3 years is a crisis in advertising, and we've had these for back to back for about 10 years, right? At least on our side. I don't know how you feel on your side, but we felt it in Singapore. So the thing we realized is there is a lack of confidence from clients on agencies in Singapore, right? From a talent pool point of view. And the thing we realized was it's because let's say 2015 to 2025, right? So let's say in 2015 this thing started, and let's say in 2015 2018 you lost 10%, and then from 2018 to 2021 you lost another 10%. What happens is after 3 generations of doing it, the people who are left don't know how to do fucking good advertising anymore. See, because what happens is you get battlefield promotions. So what happens is you kick out Jonathan or me, Zayed, and then what do? You go pick up the rifle and go to the front. Inevitably, it has to happen. But what happens when you do that in enough cycles? If you do that in enough cycles, you've now got a guy who probably, let's say, who was a senior copywriter and who got promoted to head of copy by default, and then got promoted to this and promoted to that, because the industry is shrinking anyway. But these people are moving up the line because we're also getting rid of people because mandate, Excel sheets sort by salaries out the door, performance, whatever it is, right? There's mandates.
Right.
What clients are complaining about, and I've noticed, me and Brian, we talk about, we've noticed is the type of clients who are complaining are clients who are ex-ad agency people.
Right.
Because
makes sense.
When they were in the ad agency, they knew what quality was, and now they're in these CMO posts, and they go, "This is shit. Why would I be with them? This is not the way it's done." But they've missed cycles of what we've been doing, cannibalizing each other on our end. So that's what we've noticed been happening in Singapore. Is that something that's relatable, or is that just happening on our end?
No, it's happening here as well. And also, I'd say sometimes I don't even get into nuances of I like an idea or that's not a good idea, because obviously it is quite subjective. But like, you look at just the bare bones trade of making an ad, and like, I can remember I worked on this ad with an ad agency that wasn't really an ad agency, and it was global. So, and then I traveled to a few places and saw it on like a screen in Australia, and then I went somewhere else and somewhere else. And then a couple of places I traveled to, the it wasn't locked for title safe, so like the fucking headlines were coming off the side and all that sort of stuff. And then I saw it again recently. It was Joan won an account over here, which is an independent, and like, congratulations, we won this. And it was just a fucking post on LinkedIn, and all of that, the headlines were whack off, and you couldn't even read half the headline. And I'm just like, let's not even talk about the rigor of what a good ad is. Let's just talk about the basics of trade, of just like the basic knowledge of putting an ad out, not even if it's good or bad, just and the fact that those skills are being lost because of to your point, that top skimming, and then let's make a junior a fucking CD within 2 years and all that sort of stuff. How are they to know? Because they haven't had to sweat it and go through the ranks. And so you get all of this stuff falling down. And that's before we even start assessing, why is it done like that? Because that's not a good ad. Or where's this and why is it not written like this? It's because it's to your exact point. No, it's happening here for sure.
Uh, uh, Always going to be more to talk about in this, man. John, I think, well, I don't know about you. We've been going at it for about an hour and a half now.
Yeah, let's call it.
You,
It's good talking though.
did you get a bit of coffee in you before we started?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I did.
I'm sorry if this conversation was a bit of a downer in that sense.
No, it's
In the sense of
fine. No,
we've
it's
talked
always
a lot
good
of
talking about the industry. Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. Good Sunday morning. But no, let's do it again sometime. Good, always good seeing your face.
love it, buddy. Yeah, it's actually been a while. We haven't done it. Well, we haven't done a video call in a long time. So yeah.
Yeah.
Look, guys, Scotty Chexy, you're very late. But anyway, the point is, after I'm done with this, I'll collate everything. I'll put it out in clips. Guys, people who are on, please do follow on Seven Ideas. And we're going to get out some stuff that John and I have talked about, put into good packets of topics. There's a lot to go through, I think. Thanks, mate. An hour and a half makes my life a little bit more difficult as opposed to the 45 minutes that we've done. But hey, listen, I really enjoyed it, man. Thank you very
Cool.
much.
No problems. All right. Good chatting.
Thank you, guys. Goodbye. See ya.
See ya.